Datapalooza stream, unofficial, of course, but only. So I think that's just you know, you better to be the only option if you're gonna you're competing for attention. And I just saw an amazing session, and I'm gonna let the speakers introduce themselves. Please say who you are and what was talking about on the main stage.
Hi, I'm Kimberly Richardson. I'm from Chicago, Illinois, and I'm a two-time cancer survivor, one of ovarian cancer and triple positive breast cancer. And we were talking about trust and data implications.
Hi, I'm Grace Cordovano. Happy Friday. I'm a board certified patient advocate specializing in the oncology space. My day-to-day is working with patients and families from point of diagnosis through survivorship or end-of-life care planning. And as we think about trust and transparency, some of the key points that I tried to emphasize was I don't have a lot of time to build trust and relationships. I'm walking into people's lives at some of the darkest times in their life. A new cancer diagnosis, information about a relapse, the treatment's not working, maybe we're approaching end of life care. And the way that I start to establish a relationship is by accessing a patient's records, and we start working through what's in there, the power of the records, and how to operationalize and strategize while using those records.
So I'm going to jump right into kind of the hardest, biggest questions, because both of my guests here have to go. Kimberly, you mentioned a University of Chicago study that I thought was fairly shocking results. Could you re-summarize those for our streaming?
Sure. February 2021, the University of Chicago researchers, both Sun and Peak, through, I believe, Health Affairs, published their study, their findings on Black patients who were coming through the emergency room, and how many times there were negative descriptors in their clinical notes. And their study found that 2.5 more times likely that there were negative descriptors in Black patient clinical notes through the ER, through those encounters, than there were of non-Black. And significance there, the implications of that, meaning those negative descriptors were anything from angry, aggressive, non-compliant. Issues like that are contextualized and written into your clinical notes, and those notes last forever in your electronic health records.
What I thought was fascinating is that when you talked about information blocking, which, audience, we know that you're patients and not necessarily policy wonks, but information blocking is when two institutions, the typical, what we say is it's two institutions not sharing data in an appropriate way, which is what you talked about a little bit. But you pointed out that information blocking in this manner impacts Black patients' ability to get into clinical trials, which I'd never thought about it that way. Could you say more about that?
Well, because most recruiters who are hired by sites and sponsors are using your electronic health records to find you. And so if you can imagine creaming, if you will, who's the best candidate for this clinical trial? Well, we're not going to pick somebody who, if we put in descriptors or an algorithm that looks for who's the best,
what a dirty word,
trial participant. Or we're not going to pick that person that says they're angry or they're non-compliant. We want people that are going to comply with the clinical trial. We want people that we can recruit, accrue, and finish trials. So that in and of itself is going to block so many people who could possibly be recruited to participate in the trial.
So, and of course, the exclusion of people of color and frankly women from clinical trials has been of concern for a great time. And we have great policy and legislation coming out saying we need to start really enforcing this. However, something else you pointed out on stage was that we are already talking about waivers. Could you say more about that?
Yes. FDA put out their guidelines first, and then the omnibus legislation that just recently passed in December has legislatively put into place that these every site, every sponsor has to have a diverse action plan, right? And so that means that you have to make sure that you have equal participation, right, in your clinical trials. But sponsors are already pushing back on that, because you can see that now FDA as well as Congress have decided that there needs to be some waivers. There needs to be things that are put into place just in case. So imagine a loophole that looks like this. There's a senior researcher who's done a lot of research, years of research on a clinical trial. They've gone from 30 participants to 3,000 participants.
Mm.
And they're almost ready for approval. But because of these diverse action plans, now we have to say, well, how many can you show us how many people of color were in this trial?
Mm.
So now you've got 3,000 people who've been on and who have successfully been on a drug therapy, who are going to push back on, what do you mean this is not going to get approved because it was all white people on the trial? So can you imagine the brouhaha that's going to happen with those 3,000 loud voices saying, so I don't get to live because for years this trial it wasn't diverse? So that's where you're going to start to see these waves.
No, it's going to be some uncomfortable conversations.
It's going to be some very uncomfortable conversations. Then we're going to be back to these conversations around race when we didn't really even have to be in that position. But that's where we're heading.
So, and I'd rather have an uncomfortable, accountable conversation than not have it at all. That's better, right? But it is unfortunate that we're having problems that we don't necessarily, we're creating our own problems, it sounds like, in some cases. Accountability was a major theme of what you were saying up there. From your perspective, what were some of the things you were saying accountability? Because I think you were pushed, and of course Razoo was the host, and I apologize, stream, you are not getting as good host as was on the main stage. Razoo was a better host, but Razoo asked you about accountability, and I think you pushed back and you said, "Wait, well, maybe you want to think about this in a different way."
Mm-hmm. We can't just wait for policies to fix everything. Rulemaking, new policies take years. It's not something that moves quickly. While it's necessary, and I'm not saying we should stop any of those processes, but we can't wait for solutions to just come and save us from the top down, because then no one's coming to save us. We need to teach people how to empower and save themselves, and how to share those best practices with our communities, and then how to really amplify these messages. And as I think about the new information sharing environment, I find so much joy in it, because it's going to give people access to information that they've never seen. Kim, I'm so grateful for you to bring up that study, because I personally had not seen that. I'm grateful that people are starting to read their medical records and noticing these things. They're not acceptable. We can't document this way. There's significant, serious, life-threatening, potentially consequences of the contents of our notes. Everyone should be empowered and supported to read those notes. I understand some people might need more help, but we can work together to navigate some of these things. And I'd rather move from a culture of doctor knows best, patient is too stupid, too illiterate, too non-compliant, too lazy, and all of those different stigmatizing labels, to, hey, let's work together to hack healthcare here, because it's complicated. And the truth is the medical records. And how do we inform policies with what's in our medical records in our communities? How do we inform what the vendors need to be prioritizing from patient and consumer unmet needs? So when we think about designing something that's at least incrementally better and more affordable and holistically caring for people where they are, we need to start granting access and leveling the playing field to the health information, so people also have the tools, technology, and pieces of the puzzle they need to make informed decisions about their care. It can't just be saying, well, the doctor told me to do this, and then the patient's labeled as non-compliant because they didn't do it. There's a lot of different reasons why someone might be not going with the flow with their physician's recommendations.
And I think there was and of course I'm concerned with us, that in general, having political correctness, not have conversations that we need to have. But I think there was a pretty clear movement about 10 years ago that we wanted to stop saying non-compliant. We want to stay adherent, right? Because if I'm complying to you, that implies that you have a power in the relationship, which is problematic. But if I say adherence, right, well, then there's a plan that we've made together as partners, and you're adhering to the plan. It's one of the few areas where I feel like, kind of being aware of the language you use might really have some very significant impacts. You both, in different ways, talked about, and I'll let you go after this question, not because I don't want to have you in these chairs. You're so wonderful. Your talk was amazing. This talk is amazing. I'd love to keep you all day. but I know you both have to go. You talked about big tech and holding big tech accountable, and that was something that maybe should be part of the solution, because if Washington is broken, if politics are broken, if we can't get things done politically and from a policy perspective, well, there's still the people who are controlling how information is flowing and how these systems are built, and how an electronic healthcare record is built inside an ER, for instance. Just final question. What do you want from big tech, or just technology in general, or from data in general, that you're not yet getting, that would start to address some of these issues that don't require somebody in Washington to do the right thing?
I think for me, and particularly with AI, is for them to do good, to see that these kinds of situations can happen, and to then to be able to say, if you can create an algorithm to find the negative descriptors, then you can create an algorithm that can be seen by the medical educational system, and show them this is where you need correction, right? So where we're still seeing negative descriptors in this hospital system, this is where we need to start making some changes. So if we're still seeing this at an ER level, or we're still seeing negative descriptors and clinical notes at a primary care provider level, or if we're seeing them in oncology, they can create those algorithms to then give to these cancer centers and to these hospital systems and say, self-correct. We're still seeing these negative descriptors, right?
You spoke, and I know I promised I would let you go after this, but I'm so interested in everything you're saying. You spoke about how you were able to advocate yourself, in part because you'd gone through the cancer process once and you kind of learned, and that you were able to get, I think you said, a treatment that would have been every day for 30 days down to 5 days. That's a dramatic difference. And all cancer treatments.
It's science.
So, and what you specifically said was, I was able to advocate for myself and get into this position where I was getting this benefit. But what would it be like for the next Black woman who came through? Is there any way, do you think maybe AI could be so good that AI could assist in advocating for those kind of things? Because that would be, I'd say, a positive use of AI would be good.
But also on the other side, for patient advocates, right? For those who have gone before, to be able to say, upon diagnosis, here's what you need to know. Here's what you need to know about cancer care. Here's what you need to know about treatment options. Here's what you need to know about current research.
So maybe a kind of breadcrumbs.
Ways for healthcare. Let's build that. Tell me where the barriers are. Tell me where I need to go. Punch in my diagnosis and let me know when the insurance company's gonna deny it. You know, like there's like a police officer speed trap. Let me know if there's traffic. Oh, the insurance is going to deny something probably right about here. Well, let's prepare for that.
You're going to be told, no, this is not an option for you in this office. You need to go to that office.
Absolutely. So if you get an opportunity to get in a clinical trial, but then you find out that your insurance won't cover the drug that you need to be on, right? All these kinds of pathways, but first beginning with the capacity building of the patient. And that is separate and apart from anything or any conversation that we would have with a provider. Because just in case that provider doesn't want to tell you, just in case there's some level of implicit bias or cultural incompetency, right? Where you may say, well, she came in with 3 kids, so obviously she doesn't have time for this clinical trial that may be 2 hours away. You've made a decision for me, right? Oh, she's late a couple of times. Obviously, transportation is an issue for her. She may not be able to participate in that clinical trial. You're making decisions for me. As in my case, when I looked up that research, I was able to go to that oncologist and say, that radiology oncologist, and say, this is the exact treatment that I want. And that's the difference.
So Thank you, stream, for watching. This will be something that lives on from this Datapalooza. I really appreciate you coming and talking. We're going to try to get into the show notes that study from University of Chicago. Some of the references that are talked about here, I think, are things that patient activists at least need to be able to immediately get to and say, are you aware of this study? Have you heard of these things? I think maybe that terminology, maybe if I could find a discussion about that whole non-compliance versus non-adherence, which is a lot less judgy feeling, at least to me. I'll try to link those things in. Is there any other things that I should link in?
I wanted
right.
to share really quickly the Unblock Health patient impact stories. These are real stories of the harm that happens when patients don't have access to their medical records and the good that can happen when they do. And it's a quick library of different stories, and I encourage everyone to take a look. And we're always collecting new stories. They're not used for marketing or for sales or for anything. It's really actually a lot of policy work where I share and show people real stories of what happens when you don't have access to your medical records and what happens when you do. And if anyone wants to submit any, I personally edit them myself. I'd be happy to help. So if there's any questions, you can find me at Grace Cordovano.
And just in general, I'm hesitant to endorse Twitter, but are you available on Twitter?
I am. I'm
Okay.
at KD Richardson at 924.
Okay.
At Grace Cordovano, enlightening results.
Okay. So Twitter may suddenly turn into a cesspool. At least in 2023, it is not something that we are comfortable endorsing, but is still the best way for patients to find each other as of right now. So you have that information. You should clap if you can on the other side of the camera. I'm going to clap for a second here. This stream is no substitute for being here in person. I really enjoyed your session. I thought it was an incredible way to open the day. Thank you so much for being here and being vulnerable on stage, right? That's really important. And it really helps. And I promise you, I'm listening as a technologist, and there's somebody out there who's going to be inspired to do that Ways for Healthcare thing. You're about to get denied. You're about to get told no, just warning you, letting you know. Mm-hmm. That's a thing that needs to be real. So I hope that the community is able to take you up on those suggestions. Thank you so much. I'm going to press the stop button here.
Thank you.
And I don't actually know how long it takes. I'm going to press the end stream